All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, De-risking the Digital Supply Chain with the IBM Cloud for Financial Services. My name is Jim Nicholas. I'm the Vice President of Sales with FNTS, and I'll be hosting you today for this exciting webinar. First, I wanted to go through a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. If you have questions during the session, please enter them in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. During the call, I'll be monitoring the Q&A, and there will be time left at the end of the session for us to go through and answer each of those questions, time allowing. Also, I wanted to make sure everybody understood that the webinar is being recorded, and a link will be sent out afterwards via email to the attendees. So, enter your questions as you have them during the session. We'll monitor those and we'll answer them at the end. And after the recording of the session is over, we'll send out a link. Now I'd like to introduce you to today's presenter, David Kliemann. David's the risk and controls leader for the IBM Cloud for Financial Services. He's responsible for providing support, helping clients take a risk-centric approach to their digital transformation. David helps clients and internal IBM partners understand key cloud-related security issues, regulatory requirements, and risks. Prior to joining IBM, Dave held several cybersecurity roles at Fiserv, a Fortune 500 fintech, leading cyber risk, cyber threat intelligence, security monitoring, hunting, and IT audit programs. Dave is also a 20-year U.S. naval officer, which included leading information operations and cybersecurity teams. Dave, thanks for taking your time to present on the call today, and I will turn the call over to you.
Well, thanks, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everyone. So good morning, good afternoon. I'm excited about talking to you about really what's a significant challenge across, especially the financial sector, but really across any technology-related industry in terms of the challenges that we've seen over the past few years with the digital supply chain, and what are the things that we can do to try to mitigate those particular risks. So as Jim gave a little overview of my background, so I've been part of the IBM Cloud team for a little under a year and a half now at this point. Excuse me. I primarily focus in the financial sector, partly because that's been my background since I left my Navy career, since I retired out of the U.S. Navy. As he noted, I've held several cybersecurity related roles when I was at Fiserv, and while I was a naval aviator, for the majority of my Navy career, I did get involved in information operations, including my last job where I headed the Navy Cyber Red team. So I actually headed the team whose job it was to play cyber adversary in military exercises, which was quite interesting and quite fun. If that's not enough, in my spare time, I'm actually an adjunct instructor at Marquette University. I teach a cybersecurity class in their computer science department. So what are we going to talk about today? So I'm gonna lead off with some security and regulatory trends, specifically as they are referring to the digital supply chain challenge that we face, and what we have seen over the past year or so, and how that applies to this challenge that we get with third party, fourth party suppliers, vendors, and the risks that they potentially create for our organizations. And then I'm going to go into what are some of the ways that we can go about essentially mitigating those risks. What are things that we can do? And I'm going to spend a little bit of time specifically focused on this concept of continuous compliance, and what that really means, and how that's going to impact or potentially impact an organization to make them better prepared to leverage cloud-based technologies, leverage fintechs, leverage the technology that exists to meet their business obligations and meet their business mission. And finally, I'm going to end with a call to action. It doesn't matter what stage of your digital transformation journey, your cloud journey, where you are, what you're doing. There are some things that you can think about and things that you can do as an organization to better prepare yourself. So let's start talking about what are some of the cloud threat landscape that we're seeing out here. So this is data that's pulled from the IBM X-Force security team's most recent cloud threat landscape report that was actually released about a month and a half ago. So this is this is pretty new data. Key takeaways from the report overall. It is a free report. Anybody can get access to. And at the end, I do have in the slides, you will see a link that shows to it. One of the key things that they are seeing is a significant increase and a continued increase in vulnerabilities related to cloud environments. They continue to increase, a 28% increase just last year. And you can see essentially a quarter of all cloud incidents that the X-Force team had to respond to was because a threat actor actually was exploiting a known vulnerability. Another challenge that we see out of this report is, there is excessive amount of access across cloud environments. In fact, the IBM security, basically almost 100% of their penetration testing engagements, they discovered excessive user privileges and permissions in their client cloud environments. And the reason why that is a significant challenge is because of that third bullet, which is we have seen also a significant increase in compromised cloud account credentials being sold in dark web marketplaces. So, I always talk with people going back to my time on the Navy Red team. Our number one goal, our number one tactic that we tried to do was just to get a legitimate account. If we could get a legitimate account, especially if it had, administrative or privileged access, that was the gold standard for us. The rest of our job was actually quite easy at that point. Then it was just a matter of rooting around. And we seeing that this is what real world threat actors are doing. That excessive access and those vulnerabilities create a problem and create a way that those threat actors are actually getting access into not just on-premise environments but also cloud environments. Adding on to that with some additional data from the IBM Security's Cost of Data Breach report, which was released, excuse me, this last summer. One of the things to highlight is you see that second statistic there. Now these are averages, so they kind of go back and forth a little bit. Pardon me. But as you can see, if it's a supply chain compromise that's actually part of a data breach, it's a higher cost than just the average data breach costs. We also see that if a digital supply chain was actually the significant reason for the breach, then it took almost a month longer for cybersecurity teams to actually identify and contain than the average data breach that we encounter. And you look at the slide on the picture on the lower right, you can see that supply chain attack is actually the number three in terms of types of data breach that IBM Security identified over the past year. So, another thing that, looking at this, this particular topic, let me pivot a little bit. So one of the things the IBM Cloud team has done is, as part of our mission, as part of our goal to create an environment where the financial industry can better use and safely use cloud technology. We've actually created a cloud council where we are bringing together the significant leaders, senior leaders from across the financial sector, across the globe, into a council and to a community in order to reduce the risk of cloud consumption, which will allow the financial services industry to take full advantage of the technology that's out there. And that's important because in some ways, the financial sector is actually behind other industries in terms of leveraging cloud-based technology because of the security, risk, and regulatory compliance challenges. And so as part of that, we reach out to regulators across the globe. There's the industry type topics that we are focused on in terms of solving agnostic solutions to. And that's where it's helped us get a good picture as to some of these challenges that we're talking about today. And one of them is regulatory findings around the financial services. This word cloud is built off of significant regulatory findings that have been essentially publicly released and publicly identified. And resiliency is a big one, but notice that third-party risk management is also one of the more common regulatory findings that financial institutions are running into. And especially because even if that financial institution hasn't migrated a lot of their own internal workloads into cloud environments, inevitably they're using fintechs and SaaS providers that are in cloud environments, and they have a challenge in terms of understanding what that true risk is and being able to articulate that level of risk. Another thing that we've seen within the last year, so earlier this spring, the White House released a new executive order on improving the nation's cybersecurity, and especially continuing to try to drive it for our critical infrastructure, and the different critical infrastructure sectors, which the financial sector is one of those. But if you note number 3 on there, one of the key items that they've called out was enhancing the software supply chain, because the US federal government has recognized over the past few years that as critical infrastructure organizations like financial institutions have continued to try to apply better controls to their environments, that threat actors are always changing their tactics and techniques to take advantage of whatever that weakest link is. And they found a weak link in many cases with the software supply chain. And so they're moving to try to exploit that. So why is it that the digital supply chain, that's this software supply chain, is such a challenge? If you take a step back and you think about the way that organizations functioned, financial institutions functioned 10 or even 20 years ago, a lot of them would have their own data center. They would run their applications, their environments would be run by themselves, or they would just outsource to a single or a small number of technology service providers, and you had a limited number of I'll say connections between your environment and your supply chain's environment, and so you kind of had an easier time in theory having the visibility as to what your environment looked like overall. Well, the challenge as we've had this technology revolution, this digital transformation revolution, is with all of these fintechs and these SaaS applications that are leveraging the benefits that, for example, cloud technology and some of the new things are out there, is it's no longer an easy visibility for any type of organization, financial sector, the healthcare sector, a utility, whatever the case might be. And they depend so heavily on these digital suppliers. But as you note there through those question marks, they don't have that visibility, not only to those suppliers, but also their suppliers. That's where the term fourth party has really come into play, which is understanding that the risk isn't just between you and your supplier, but also whoever they are leveraging as a technology vendor, a technology supplier. And and it can even go on from there, fourth, fifth, sixth party. But what we've really come to realize as an industry is we've got to increase the ability to have that visibility, the alignment of how everybody is protecting their respective pieces of the environment in order to create an ecosystem that across the financial sector that has the security, the risk management, and the regulatory compliance controls that are baked in. So how can you do that? Let's talk about what are the ways to do that. And I'm going to start at a very high level. It's this concept of continuous security and compliance, and even this, if you may have heard of this term, policy as code, which is really about trying to automate as much as you possibly can. And if you think about this concept, it really breaks down into three major areas. The first area is define. You've got to create a set of controls, a framework of controls that are based on your security requirements, your risk requirements, and for the regulated industries, your regulatory compliance requirements. You have to have those to begin with, because if you don't, what you're going to end up with is you're going to end up with this ad hoc hodgepodge approach to security and risk management. You may be strong for a particular vendor, it may be strong for a particular tool, but it's not going to be comprehensive across your entire ecosystem. Then the next thing you need to do is you need to implement those controls. It's one thing to have a set of controls. It's a whole nother thing to implement them, especially when we talk about the complexity of what it takes to actually run a bank, for example, all of the components to it, all of the different applications and vendors and functions that it takes to do that. And as much as possible, you want to try to find ways to automate that implementation. You want to take the potential for human error out, because when we start talking about cloud environments, when we start talking about third party and fourth party, the more human hands you have in it, the more possibility there is for there to be an error, for there to be a misconfiguration or something along those lines, which is going to open up your risk. It's going to open up you to being attacked or having a data breach. And that's all well, so we define, we implement, and then the third piece is you have to assess, and ideally continuously assess what you're doing. A lot of third-party risk management programs that were built up and started, over the past couple of decades were really, it was more of a questionnaire type, and there's value in that. You want to understand, whether it's a once a year audit or a once a year questionnaire, there's a place for it. However, if that's all you're doing for understanding what your suppliers are doing, these, especially some of these startup fintech companies, they're moving so fast with their DevOps and mindset, their CI/CD pipelines. They're making so many changes that what was answered in the questionnaire, while it may have been accurate at the time, may not be accurate a month, 2 months, 6 months later. And it's hard to really know when your risk posture as a financial institution has changed because of it. So how can you do that? So on the IBM Cloud side, what we've created is we've developed this IBM Cloud framework for financial services to kind of be at the core of exactly just that. If you remember a couple slides ago, it had the bank, it had the cloud service provider, it had that digital supplier. Well, what we've taken is we've created this framework of controls. They're risk-centric controls that are designed to actually create a consistent set of controls across the entire financial sector ecosystem for everybody that is deploying, leveraging this particular framework of controls. And this framework has been created. It wasn't just something that IBM created. Going back to that financial services council that I talked about, that was really part of why that council came together. Was, there's a ton of frameworks that are out there. In fact, one of the challenges that in the risk management, the cyber risk, component of cybersecurity really is, well, which framework are you going to be talking about? And the challenge is they all have a lot of overlap. They all have slightly different ways that they do things. And so what we've done on the IBM's cloud side is we started with the NIST, one of the industry baseline standards as that point. We've brought in, we've incorporated other consortiums and forums, Cloud Security Alliance, the Cyber Risk Institute, PCI, all of those. We've actually leveraged the financial services council members, their internal frameworks that they had created, and then we've added on the global regulations. We've got a global regulatory watch, and all of those requirements have been fed into this cloud for financial services framework to become the bedrock for this is the set of controls that can get deployed on IBM Cloud, and if they are, you can have high confidence that you can align or you can demonstrate for any of these different components that are in there, whether it's global regulations or it's some other industry standard. In fact, we've just recently, in the last few months, finished a significant working group with the Cloud Security Alliance to demonstrate the mapping to their CCM. In order to, the cloud control matrix that CSA puts out, so that we can demonstrate that, and anyone who is leveraging this framework can also demonstrate with high confidence the alignment to CCM. The same has been true with Cyber Risk Institute, just put out their profile in the last couple months that they published, that we've been a part of, and we can demonstrate the alignment to that. But if you don't have a comprehensive framework of controls, that becomes your foundation, your bedrock for what you're building, then it really becomes a challenge to be able to demonstrate that you're doing everything that you need to across your entire digital supply chain and your ecosystem for everything. And so, this kind of fills in the slide about the define, the implement, and the assess right here for how IBM Cloud is doing it. So on the left-hand side, in fact, I actually like talking about it in terms of kind of your traditional technology IT operations language. You've got plan, you've got build, and then you've got run. So, you take the framework of controls, you turn those into reference architectures. Those reference architectures, that's your plan. That's what you're going to build your environments from. And then you build, whether you're talking about IBM Cloud services or whether you're talking about your digital suppliers, that ecosystem of SaaS and fintech suppliers that are out there. But you also have to then, once we build it, we know that just because you build it the way that you want, doesn't mean you're not going to have deviations as you continue to operate your environment, your day-to-day business. So you have to monitor, and you have to do that monitoring in a real-time or near real-time basis because of the speed that everything moves at in the cloud environments. So how do we expand that from an ecosystem standpoint, from that digital supply chain? The way that IBM Cloud is doing it is we're taking that framework of controls, and as we are onboarding SaaS providers, fintechs into IBM Cloud, they're coming onto the IBM Cloud for Financial Services framework. So a financial institution can have a high confidence at that point that because we validate that they actually, these fintechs actually deploy and implement those controls appropriately, it creates a level of assurance and a level of confidence that financial institutions have that those controls that they think they're using also apply to their supply chain. And nothing's perfect. We're not saying risk is zero at this point, but by doing this, you now have a better feel for, what, I know that supplier X or fintech Y, I know that they're not just making stuff up on the fly, that they're actually leveraging and implementing something that has some meat behind it. And I also know, because IBM Cloud goes through a validation process with them where we make sure that that's what they do, that it's not just, that's one of the problems with questionnaires is sometimes people answer questions to their best of their knowledge, but they may not have the knowledge to answer those third-party risk questionnaires. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time now focused on that third piece, that assessment piece, the continuous compliance component of it, and what you as an organization really need to do if you want to make sure that you're maintaining your security, risk, and compliance posture to what it needs to be. And really what it boils down to again is you need to have a continuous monitoring effort that's telling you, it's not just the logs that are going into the SIM, which that's important because that's your security operations center is going to protect you from cyber attacks, but that doesn't necessarily tell you what your risk level is. And why do we have challenges with this across the sector these days? Well, one is because you have a challenge with a unified view. There's actually an IBM Business Value or the IBV Institute of Business Value report out recently that actually highlights that the average number of clouds that a financial sector or financial institution is actually 10 cloud environments because of that digital supply chain. So being able to have that unified view becomes a real challenge. And when you don't have it, if you're actually trying to do continuous monitoring of your entire ecosystem, it starts to become really, really complex, and it becomes a real challenge then to track that drift as it happens over time. And so what you need to do as an organization is you need to design and architect your respective environment to create that unified view, increase that visibility, and to simplify the picture so that you have the ability to have a true understanding as to what's happening in your environment. And the way that IBM Cloud does it is we've got a tool called the Security and Compliance Center, or SCC. It runs on IBM Cloud, but it is actually in line with IBM's hybrid multi-cloud strategy. We are a believer that there is not going to be one cloud to rule them all. There are too many different vendors out there. There's too many different suppliers and too many different SaaS and fintechs. So they're going to choose the clouds that work for them. So we are a believer in creating a security, compliance, posture management tool and system that actually gives you the visibility across whatever your environments are. It doesn't matter whether it's on-prem, whether it's in a cloud, in IBM Cloud, or whether it's in a different cloud service provider. And that's because you can create those compliance guardrails. You automate the security and compliance monitoring, but a key part is you're mapping it back to your profiles. I'm actually, if I go back 3 slides just for a second, it's important. There are different CSPM tools that are out there on the market, but it's not just enough to do posture management in your environment. If from a security, risk, and regulatory compliance standpoint, you need your posture management to actually be measuring back to what you think you've deployed. Your framework of controls. How are you making sure that those framework of controls are actually implemented and still functioning the way that you think they should be? And that's where something like Security and Compliance Center can really come in and it can be useful wherever your workloads are deployed, because it gives you that single pane of glass view of what your risk and compliance posture is in a real-time basis. This isn't necessarily, I've got to create a whole bunch of reports every month. I need to, I need to send out these questionnaires. It boils down to you send the, you put collectors into wherever your environments are. That information feeds back into a tool like SEC, and now you've got that single pane of glass. Now you've got the visibility, and it's even designed to give like a risk score. Think of it like a credit score, so that it allows you, as the security, the risk, the compliance individuals in a financial institution, to know whether or not there's been a challenge, whether there's been an issue, and how bad is that issue, or how big is that issue, because you're not just randomly measuring it, you're measuring it back against those controls. All right. So I've said a lot of things, and we'll open up shortly for questions. But one of the things that I want to highlight, what are things that you could take away today, immediate call to action, things to know that are going to help you de-risk your digital supply chain. So the first one is, you have to have a full inventory of what is your suppliers, what's your supply chain. So, both from, there's a relatively newer term, and we talk, software bill of materials, or you hear it referred to as an SBOM, a cloud bill of materials, so that you know what's in a particular cloud environment. This sounds easy, and in theory it should be really easy. Unfortunately, there's a lot of organizations that if they start to have the IT teams and the security teams and the risk team, they may not be the ones always making the decision about, we're going to go to this cloud environment, or we're going to use that particular tool. Oftentimes it's the lines of business, the business units, that's just to move at the speed that they want to function at in today's age. They just start making those decisions and start going off and doing things. And it is a fundamental tenet of cybersecurity that if you don't know what you have, it's really, really hard to protect it. And the first step to do that, especially when we're talking about cloud environments, and the digital supply chain, is conduct that inventory. Make sure that you've got a full inventory of what you have. The second one is conduct a comprehensive risk assessment across your digital supply chain. Identify which of those suppliers are critical, which ones are important, which ones are nice to have. They do something for you, but if there was a problem with it, it's not going to cause you to go out of business. It's not going to cause you as a financial institution to suddenly incur regulatory fines and penalties. The third one is pick and adopt an industry aligned controls framework. Now, obviously, as I said earlier, IBM Cloud is very proud of all of the hard work we've done with our Cloud for Financial Services framework, where we've spent a lot of time and effort to put it, bring it together, to make sure that it aligns with other industry frameworks, that aligns with security best practices, that aligns with regulatory compliance, and that aligns with some of the largest global financial institutions, what they consider to be can be important. But regardless of whatever framework you use, pick an industry controls framework and leverage that. A little side note: that's actually in the class the cybersecurity class that I teach at Marquette. I actually do that. I make the students apply it's actually the NIST cybersecurity framework to an organization, because I go back again to, if you're not picking a framework, you don't have a comprehensive set of controls. You're going to have some areas that are really strong, but you're going to have gaps, and that's what threat actors look for. They look for the gaps and weaknesses in your defenses in order to find ways to compromise your environment. And then the fourth call to action is around you need to implement continuous monitoring. And it's not just continuous security monitoring, not just continuous operations monitoring, but you want to make sure that it incorporates risk and compliance as part of that. Like I said, IBM Security and Compliance Center, SCC, is one way. We're very proud of the hard work that we've done on that particular tool, and it continues to evolve over time and increase its capabilities even more above what it is today. But if you do nothing else but just start those 4 actions, that's going to get you on the road to maturity, to increasing your understanding and de-risking what your overall digital supply chain is. And so then the last thing that I'm going to talk about is, so I mentioned our cloud council that we have. So our cloud council is made up of senior executives, security, risk, technology executives across the globe from over 100 or over 80 financial institutions. There's well over 100 executives that are part of it. But as this community has grown, one of the things, or as this council has grown, one of the things that we've wanted to do is take this work and continue to spread it across the financial sector. So we've actually created a financial services community. It's hosted on IBM. There is a lot of really interesting information, both internal to the council, but we've also brought in external providers, supplier. I'll say, for example, we've had Cloud Security Alliance come and give a presentation that's recorded on there. There's access to IBM Cloud training, some types of free access. So obviously the QR code and the link is here. It's going to also be in the resources when we send out the slides from this particular presentation. So with that, Jim, I will kind of turn it back over to you for any questions that we might have.
Fantastic, David. And just a reminder to everyone, please use the chat window. It'll be on the right side of your screen if you have any questions for David. I'll take a second just to let people digest all the information that was just shared. I know it was a lot, and that was outstanding, David. So I'll give it a second if there are any questions that folks have that they want to ask, to give them some time to post those in the chat window. And if not, there are a couple that I will have queued up that I'll share with you in just a second. So let's give everybody about 30 seconds or so if there's any questions they want to type up. All right. So one of the questions that I've heard in the past that I'm going to kind of get the party started is, how is the IBM Cloud for Financial Services different than the VMware for Regulated Workloads cloud?
It's a good question. So understand that we're all talking about IBM Cloud here when we talk about those two particular pieces. So the VMware for regulated workloads is a specific configuration of VMware that gets deployed onto IBM Cloud. That is essentially a subset of cloud for financial services, because there's such a wide variety of technology. In fact, my joke when I used to be at Fiserv was when people would ask what technology did Fiserv use, the answer was yes. If it existed, it was someplace in Fiserv. And that's true across the financial sector. There's such a wide variety. So not everybody needs to leverage VMware to create a platform that way. There's other technology stacks and other technology types that are being used across the financial sector. And for example, when we talk about cloud native and containerized environments, well, IBM, Red Hat, OpenShift, that's our containerized technology that has been incorporated into and validated to using the Cloud for Financial Services framework. So when you go into IBM Cloud, you can actually see in the Cloud catalog the IBM services that have specifically gone through the validation process. So the VMware for regulated workloads, it's a very key piece of it, but it is really just a subset of this broader effort to not only for the IBM Cloud services, but as I mentioned, how do we pull in that entire ecosystem and digital supply chain so that everybody is operating from the same set of controls, even, they might be implemented differently because you have different tech stacks, but that way we all know what we've built against and how we're operating. Great question, though.
Wonderful. Thanks. Another question is, what should clients expect in the future direction for the IBM Cloud for Financial Services?
Well, what I would say is it's a continued it's essentially almost a living effort to continue to grow and stay up to date. Because our goal is we are going to make sure that the Cloud for Financial Services meets the security, risk, and compliance needs of the financial sector, whether you're talking the financial institutions themselves or that digital supply chain. And cyber threat landscape changes. It evolves over time. Some things stay the same. So we make sure that we incorporate changes. Regulatory requirements change. The biggest one that is really going on right now, especially in Europe, is this, but even here in North America with Canada and the US, is this concept of operational resilience. So in Europe, there's a new regulation that's working its way through called DORA for Digital Operational Resilience Act. The U.S. regulators and the Canadian financial regulators are also talking about this in terms of how they are doing things. So what we are going to make sure that we do is we are going to keep a watch on the entire landscape, whether it's security, whether it's regulatory, whether it's risk management, so that we can incorporate, if we identify something that is coming up, we can start incorporating it right away into IBM Cloud's capabilities so that it will continue to meet the financial institutions' needs and the financial sector needs before it be like DORA, before it becomes a requirement, while it's still in that phase. And so we're not doing this, what you see a lot of times, which is, a new regulation came out, now everybody's panicking and they have to scramble to how are we going to make sure that we adhere to it. We try to get ahead of that game.
Excellent. And then the last question is, how does a client get started? What are the steps they go through if they've determined or are interested in exploring this further? How do they get started?
Well, I would say, one of the things is make sure that you talk with an IBM contact, because it's not, one of the things that we really focus on. It's not just hey, here's a reference architecture, you go do what you want. We're trying to build that in, and so when it comes time to getting started, it really boils down to it. The specific steps are going to depend on where you are at in your digital transformation journey. Where are you at in terms of your cloud journey? What does your tech stack look like? We have there's if you use a consulting team, IBM Consulting or someone else, to help you understand and actually map out what that roadmap should be, so that you can make the smart choices. Because, by the way, not everything should necessarily move to a cloud environment. I go back again, IBM fully recognizes that we are living in a hybrid multi-cloud world. There are going to be organizations, financial institutions, that there are going to be some workloads that are going to make sense on one cloud. There's some workloads that are going to make sense in another cloud. And there are some workloads or applications that they may say, nope, it's just got to stay right here in our own data center. And those are one-off conversations that you have to have.
Okay, great. There's been a couple other questions that have come in. And thank you for answering that one. Good starting point. And just to reiterate that, as a client's looking to get started, that's something that FNTS is certainly able to help clients get started on that journey, and working with Dave and the IBM team. All right, two other questions. The first one: how does IBM Cloud for Financial Services free up financial institutions to focus on innovation, a la build the bank versus run the bank?
So, one of the challenges that financial institutions have is, it's because when we talk with both technology and security and risk folks from across banks, across the globe, is that they are so busy just trying to get a handle on, especially legacy technologies, and trying to figure out, how are you going to architect what you're going to deploy as part of this digital transformation into a cloud environment, that it takes up a lot of their time. And that's where leveraging something like IBM Cloud for Financial Services, leveraging the framework, leveraging the reference architectures to create that deployment, what it does is it assists your architecture model in terms of how you're going to deploy it. It also, one of the other challenges that we have heard consistently across the financial sector is this lack of skills within the financial sector around cloud technologies. Maybe a small startup fintech, they know how to do Kubernetes, they know coding, or they know how to create a containerized application or functions as a service or something like that to do something. But you have all of these financial institutions that are they still got to keep the lights on, they still got to operate, they still got to deal with the regular incidents, outages that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, but they're also tasked to help with the digital transformation. And so and by the way, they've been leveraging on-premise technologies or mainframe technology, and they may not be the experts in doing that. And so that's where leveraging something that you already know meets the regulatory requirements, the risk management requirements, can allow you to focus on, okay, so then now how do I actually go through the journey, instead of, well, what should the journey even look like?
Okay, awesome. Yeah, a great question as well. Next one. Is the IBM Cloud for Financial Services an all-encompassing offering, meaning take it all, or can a client individually select specific offerings a la carte?
The answer is both. It depends. I mean, the ideal situation is you're deploying all of your workloads. Like I showed that picture, you've got the full set of controls around the entire your entire ecosystem. However, I have seen there are plenty of clients that only leverage a small part of it, maybe because they're already in two different clouds and they don't want to move something else over. And that's where, without going into, I didn't have time. I didn't go into detail about, IBM Cloud Satellite, which allows you to manage a multi-hybrid cloud world, manage your workloads, like in conjunction now with the Security and Compliance Center, where you can actually monitor and assess what your status is, your profile is, compared to an industry aligned framework. So we've actually seen both types of situations.
Okay, fantastic. Last question, and a really good one. It sort of goes back to the initial one. As clients are looking at the offering, can you talk a little bit about the size of the bank or institution, that may be interested in it? Is there a situation where they're too small to take on IBM Cloud for Financial Services, or sort of what's the place?
So you got cut off there, Jim, but I got the gist of the question, and what I would say is there isn't there isn't something that such a thing as you're too small for this. Yes, this journey started with IBM Cloud with some of the largest global banks, and that's how the journey started. But one of the interesting things is, whether you're a regional, a super regional, or even down to a community financial institution, they want to be part of this digital transformation journey. They need to do this, but they don't have the hundreds of millions or billions of dollars that these largest banks that are out there are applying to their security, their digital transformation. And that's actually where there's a lot of potential benefit of, you don't have to recreate everything, an entire program from scratch. You could potentially leverage, again, there's a framework out there. It's been aligned to industry frameworks. It meets regulatory requirements from wherever you might be, as whatever jurisdiction that you're operating in. And by the way, we've explained this to regulators and received very positive feedback about this particular approach to it. So you can actually get a head start. You can, even if you're a smaller financial institution or a small fintech that wants to get into, further penetration into the financial sector itself, you can leverage this and it can jumpstart your programs so that you can demonstrate, whether you're the fintech or whether you're the small financial institution, that you are doing everything that you need to in order to mitigate the risks to your digital supply chain. And so that really it's not dependent, because that's one of the other things about cloud technology is, when we talk about clouds, you pay for what you're using. So you don't necessarily have to always do massive upfront capex cost investments in terms of how you do it. And that's why you can even, that's why when I say the a la carte from the last question, is because one of the things that we see or financial institutions or the fintechs, they'll say, we're going to do this on IBM Cloud, and actually they've been very happy about it. And so you tend to have, oh well, now that we do this, let's do the next stage, and we'll do more and more things so that we can bring more and more of our environment into this secure and compliant ecosystem.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. I think that concludes the questions. Dave, thank you for your time today and sharing this incredible content. Really appreciate it. As I mentioned, there will be, the call is recorded. There will be a link that will get sent out. And then Dave, any final words?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks again for the opportunity to talk today. In the slide deck, you'll see this particular slide here. We've got some information about the Cloud for Financial Services, about the framework of controls, another link to directly to the community. There's also, because a lot of times when I reference the IBM Security Cost of Data Breach and Cloud Threat Landscape reports, so there's links to those. They are free and open to download for anyone. So I really appreciate it, and I want to just say thank you everyone for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks everyone. Thanks again, Dave. This concludes the call.